Okay, in this lecture, we're going to be discussing inequality as related to the social category of race. Okay, so we're going to be talking about how does race affect our life chances in society. This obviously, I'm sure many of us can relate to this on a personal level. Race, first of all, we should discuss is a social construction. Once again, it's a very important sociological concept. Whenever we talk about the idea of what is a social construction, what we can basically say is it is something that society made up. It is not necessarily based in reality or science. It's something that we as human beings socially invented. Okay, lots of different examples of this. Again, if you've had introduction to sociology or any of my classes before, you know that's a very important topic. This concept of social constructions. We can talk about lots of different things. Borders, for example, are social constructions. They may be based on things like geological or physical characteristics like rivers, lakes, oceans, mountain ranges, those kind of things. But really, what makes a border is just the idea that human beings have agreed that one nation's territory ends here and another one leads up to it, right? Weather doesn't recognize what borders are. Animals don't recognize a disease, certainly doesn't. We know about that. So all these things are just things that human beings make up, right? And the concept of race is the same, right? There are no inherent biological characteristics among the species Homo sapiens that divides us up, right? Uh, we can say, but there's certainly things, physical characteristics about us, such as eye shape, hair type, skin color, right, that make up what we call races, but they don't biologically distinguish us from one another. Okay, human beings are one species. We are capable, except for on an individual level, based on individual characteristics, but we're capable of reproducing with one another to produce viable offspring. That's the definition of a species. So we know that many of the racial characteristics that we use are very arbitrary too. We could just say skin color, for example. Human beings' skin tones range, from very, very, very pale to very, very, very dark. So to kind of say, and this comes up a lot of times even within racial groups, right? This idea of dark skin, light skin, whose skin tones, what, different colors, those kind of things. Again, arbitrary distinctions that are really not based on anything biological other than the fact that at times human beings have been physically isolated from one another and took on certain physical characteristics based on just the geographical isolation they had from other people, right? So race is a social construction, okay? So society decides racial definitions, not biology. So, what kind of consequences does this have in our society? Right? When we talk about the idea of social and economic consequences, so how does race affect us? Well, we absolutely know, and again, if you have not taken or considering taking more sociology classes, Sociology 205, Race and Culture, dive way deeper into this than we're going to right here. But we definitely know that the rates of poverty among African Americans and Hispanics in our society are 2 to 3 times higher than they are for white people. In the 1950s, the median family income was about 54% of white families. In 2012, it's still only about 62%. So just based on the fact that depending on what racial category you fit into in our society can absolutely affect how much money you make or are able to make in society. We can also talk about this concept of, going the other way, prejudice, right? What is prejudice? Prejudice is a belief, right? Beliefs, a cultural belief that some groups are inferior to other groups, right? So we definitely look at our own society and we realize that, we definitely have one of our cultural values is this idea of racial superiority. We now, on an individual level, you yourself might be saying, I don't believe that. But when we look at the society as a whole, we recognize that much of our society and much of our history, and even a lot of the ways that our society is structured today is based on this concept of some groups are just naturally inferior to other groups, and some, conversely, other groups are superior. So we look around in our society and we can absolutely tell that much of our cultural hegemony revolves around ideas of groups being inferior, more prone to violence, less prone to productivity or effectiveness. Um, we definitely know that we, again, related to some of the other things we've talked about in our society, blame certain racial groups for the consequences or the circumstances in which they find themselves. Um, we definitely can study lots and lots and lots of different, and many of these are referred to in your textbook about unequal hiring practices. The idea that a very famous study by sociologist Deborah Pager talked about the idea of sending people out with exactly the same qualifications as far as education to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of employers in different cities as well. So we're not just talking about prejudice in a particular place in the United States, but and the only distinguishing characteristic is which group were grouped black and white, and which groups had criminal records. There were black applicants with criminal records and black applicants without, and white applicants with criminal records and white applicants without. And typically, when we were talking about this, we'd say, okay, well, clearly, probably in hiring, one of the things that's going to probably be most related to whether or not you get a call back after an interview is whether or not you have a criminal record. Well, we actually found that, and it's not a surprise, whites without criminal records got the highest numbers of callbacks, and blacks with criminal records got the least amount. But pointing to this idea, we definitely know that whites with criminal backgrounds still got more callbacks, requests for a second interview, than did blacks without criminal records. Okay, so in a lot of ways, race is a higher qualification than is whether or not a person's been convicted of a crime or not. So that's where we get the distinction between prejudice, which is a belief, right, in a racially motivated or racially related thought, and discrimination, which is action based on prejudice. Okay, so prejudice is thoughts or beliefs. Discrimination is action based on those thoughts and beliefs. So when a person has an attitude about racial inferiority and then acts on it, either by not hiring somebody, not choosing to engage with them, by taking actions that harm that other person's, again, ability to succeed in society or access to resources, then that's discrimination. And again, many people have talked about this idea. Are there solutions to the problems of prejudice and discrimination, which are clearly affecting people's life chances? And one of the most common things that comes up is our policies. That umbrella term could be described as affirmative action. Again, policies that try to eliminate or alleviate the effects of discriminatory practices that have gone on in our society for a very long time. So we talk about this idea of what can be done. Certainly, we talk about equal opportunity employment. We talk about the idea of, and this is a very big topic going on as we speak, as I'm taping this, opportunities in education, which again we'll talk about in just a minute. But again, blanket policy, we could say affirmative action or policies developed to counteract cumulative injustices in our society based on prejudice and discrimination. Of course, they've not been completely successful, and that's due to many, many, many criticisms of affirmative action policies and programs. This idea of, a lot of times the argument given back is that's letting less qualified people sometimes into more necessary parts of society. Again, people will just on a philosophical level say that's just reverse discrimination. You're telling us discrimination is wrong, so therefore how can we discriminate in the other direction and claim that it's okay? And again, sometimes the effects of affirmative action felt by subordinate or minority groups is that they feel like people are always assuming that they've gotten their positions in society, jobs or whatever, because of affirmative action. So this question comes up as, okay, if we're going to have these policies in place, at what point, should we consider that these policies are no longer necessary? And typically it's come down to 3 points. When can we assume that the accumulated injustices we've talked about have been overcome? When can we look around and decide whether or not a significant amount of discrimination still exists in society? And if we want to do away with affirmative action, are there other things in society that we could put in place to use instead? Okay, next we'll talk about inequality in relation to gender.